Hello, welcome to Manibil. This time I'm going to take a dive into the recurring series of Stefan Molyneux about the history of philosophers, and recently a new part 20 have arrived after a bit of a break, after a rant which I have also deconstructed here on my channel. You may, you know, go back and listen to that. I think it's called Stefan Molyneux Loathes His Own Philosophy, something like that. Um, and why don't we just jump in and listen to what he has to say? Okay, I have listened somewhat a little to it, but not fully, to have an idea where we're going. And he's basically trying to settle the various kinds of metaphysics here, or at least that's the starting point. If he actually deals with it, I'm not sure, but time will tell. But it's basically sort of empiricism, idealism, whatever, right? Skepticism. Okay, let's go in.
All right, so I'm going to get back onto this History of Philosophers series, but I wanted to take a pause here and give you the framework in some ways going forward. And the framework is this. So there are three major forms or branches of philosophy. The first, of course, is empiricism, which is the...
It's not a branch of philosophy. Empiricism is not a branch, right? What do you mean by a branch of philosophy? That would be nice, because the branches I would think of is metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, right? And you might add a few more that depending on your, on your temper, like objectivity or, beauty, aesthetics, politics, whatever. I just think that they're sort of either purely subjective or some kind of screwed up fantasy, something like that, right? So the major things in philosophy that I would refer to as a branch is metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. These are the three big ones, right? And if you're not addressing it that way, I would think that I don't know, but he should understand this. He has mentioned these branches, quote, a lot of times, right? So why is empiricism all of a sudden a branch? I don't see that as a branch. Empiricism is a particular classification or delineation of what it takes to be able to get to knowledge. So it's a subsection of epistemology, you could say, right? It's a certain axiom within potential axiom. It's not a necessary axiom, I would say, but it's a potential axiom you could use in epistemology. Why is that a branch of philosophy? Then everything you're doing when you're doing any kind of philosophy is some kind of small or larger branch. And then the whole idea of branch doesn't really make sense, right? So what it sounds like to me is trying to lift a certain aspect up to a very much higher status that it needs to have. Now, I'm not saying that empiricism is not important. What that doesn't make it a branch of philosophy, right? Okay, this could be sort of a back and forth, tomato kind of thing, right? Empiricism is the axiom that however you get to knowledge, it has to be somehow through direct experience, right? It has to be based on some kind of sense or equalia from senses. Senses is sort of a fluffy term, right? Equalia is a color, a sound, a taste, and so on, right? If it's empirical, it's directly referencing these kinds of experiences, right? Otherwise, it's not empirical. And it cannot be knowledge if it doesn't, right? It's sort of a classification to say, it's not necessarily knowledge that you have the qualia of sound, for instance, right? But without any reference to sound, it cannot be knowledge. It can never become knowledge because there's something missing, which is the empirical aspect, right? That's the idea of empiricism. Empiricism is sort of a skeptical approach to knowledge, right? Okay.
The Aristotelian argument that there's a real world out there, we get accurate information about it through the senses, through the...
Okay, that's not what empiricism is. Just because you have an experience like sound or taste and so on, color, doesn't make it accurate necessarily. Compared to what, right? And if you say that there is a world out there, okay, then you have to establish that as an axiom. You can't just state it as if it's sort of given, right? You have to refer to something when you are claiming this kind of existence, right? And what would that be? What would you work from, right? This kind of philosophy where you say there's this, there's that, there's this, there's that, right? I guess you could do it, but personally I wouldn't trust it, because if you cannot refer to anything, most notably in the case you're saying empiricism, there must be some kind of reference to an experience. Well, this is the kind of paradox that Stefan Molyneux is completely unable to identify, which I tried to point out to him when I participated in his show, and it's called the Big Metaphysics Debate, though I didn't concur to the debate, and I wasn't sure that this was a debate. I was just a call-in guy, right? Trying to, come in from the sidelines so without being sort of too official about it, right? Just ask, rationality rules. What happens when you make an agreement on doing a show with him, right? He's basically, pisses you in the face. But he doesn't understand there's a built-in paradox, right? If you're saying that there's an outside world, right? What is it outside other than your mind? And those experiences is within the confinements of this thing called mind, right? Mind is not a thing, I'm sorry, right? Mind is merely an umbrella term that encompasses all that is you could say. Your experiences, your emotions, your abstractions, your ideas, your philosophy, everything, right? All that's going on in you is mind. It's an umbrella term. It's not a description, right? I want to stress that. That's how I approach it, right? But in order to sort of not always say, experiences, mind, cognitions, you mention 10, 15 different things, I just say mind, right? If there's something outside your mind, how did you get to that? Because it seems to me you need the experiences within your mind in order to have any understanding that there might be something outside that mind, right? So it's basically an interpretation of your experiences. How did you get from those experiences to the interpretation that they are something outside, right? How did you get to that? I'm not saying you can't get to it, but in my opinion, there's nothing in the experiences as such that necessitates that they being some kind of representation of an outside, right? So if I'm going to reason ahead in this direction, I need to start from an axiom. And the axiom would be these particular experiences I will treat as representations of something outside my mind, right? Because if it's outside my mind, I can't experience it, because I have made the confinement called mind, in which is the inside, and the outside is that other realm, right? So if I'm only having access to some kind of representation, I do not have direct access to whatever that world I have created from axiomatically. What that is, that entails, what is it like? I have no access to that. I only have those representations, which I've only established axiomatically by deciding them being so, right? So he's just jumping into saying there's a world out there, right? And if he says that the world out there is these experiences, then he's making he's stretching his experiences to be the same beyond his experiences, right? How can he get to say that? Okay, I'm getting a little ahead of the story, but I've been here before several times with him, right?
Through the consistency of behavior of matter and energy, we get
matter and energy. They are just abstractions. They are models. They are models of what is potentially what is a representational model that is functional in order to calculate whatever scientifically, right? When you're referring to matter and energy, you're not referring to something that is outside. You're referring to something that is inside. And potential inside representation of something outside. But if you're referring to that inside and you're ascribing that as matter and energy, then nothing says that needs to be something similar or identical out there, right? How could an outside world be identical to an inside world, right? If let's say there are 8 billion people in the world, then there would be one world and then 8 billion copies of that world inside human beings. Not to talk about, monkeys and dolphins and, ants and spiders and so on, right? How does that work? It doesn't work, right? So the mind must be some kind of reduced representation of it, if it is at all a representation. But I will be willing to go there axiomatically, right? So when you're saying matter and energy, you are referring to something that is not that which is out there, if that's what you're trying to do.
Logic and reason leads to truth about the world, and it's all objectively verifiable, and that's the Aristotelian.
Oh, objectively verifiable. Okay, he's very, very quick to, just throw words at you here, right? Which is a common thing with him and a lot of other, pop philosophers, right? So, what does it mean that it's objective, right? At what point, if there's something outside that is verifiable, then why is it objective if you need to verify it? If you're starting from a point where it's not verified, then it cannot be objective, right? So what kind of instrument do you need to upgrade something from potentially subjective to objective? Having an experience. Well, an experience is subjective because you are having the experience. At what point does it become objective? What does that mean? I'm not saying you can't get to objectivity, but it needs to be explained what you mean. If it's verifiable, if it's given to you objective, let's say, right? Why do you need to verify it? And if it's not objective, but you can verify your way to objectivity, how do you go about doing that? Please explain, right?
In empiricism.
Oh, using empiricism. So you need an experience, right? Because empiricism relates to colors, sounds, taste, and so on, right? So you need your subjective experience to verify things from subjective to objective, or what? Already here, it gets pretty, shitty philosophy, right?
Now, Platonic idealism.
Okay, so done with that. Platonic idealism, yeah. But what is that idealism and Platonic idealism? Is that the same, or are there different kinds of idealism? Then, since you're calling it Platonic idealism, right? I would think there would be, though they might be the same, but traditionally there are different kinds of idealism, as far as I understand, and that is also what he's alluding to by calling it Platonic idealism, right?
Is saying that there is a truth realm inaccessible to the senses.
A truth realm? What is a truth realm? What's that? But what's a truth realm, right? Truths are, floating around, or what? What is a truth? Can it be in a realm, or can you grab a truth, or can you experience a truth, or how does that work?
Is directly and contradictory to the senses that creates that contains a truth superior to anything we get in material reality.
What is material reality? Didn't you say empirical reality, objective reality? Now it's also material reality. So already these terms, I am just, I am arriving from just doing a deconstruction series on Bernardo Kastrup and Robert Spira, right? And it's the same thing. They're just throwing around words without any clarification. I mean, Stefan Molyneux has been doing this for 20 years or something like that, right? And he's still just throwing around words. And he's throwing around the same words about the same subjects without any traction, apparently, right? Why not start from the ground floor? Why not start, rather than telling about these people have bad metaphysics, why don't you start with your own metaphysics and say, I am working from this point, right? This is my start block. This is my reduction base. I'm starting from here and building everything from that, right? It's always this, this is bad metaphysics, therefore my metaphysics is good, right? Which is sort of what's between the lines here, as far as I can hear, right?
That's Platonic idealism. Now, the third we're going to start exploring because it comes up as a response to the growing power of the scientific method. We talked about Francis Bacon and so on. So the growing power of the scientific method posed real challenges to theology, and one of the ways in which theology responded was with a sort of radical subjectivism, or at least I would call it radical subjectivism. And it's the argument that nothing exists unless it is observed. Nothing exists unless it is observed.
Okay, the problem with these kinds of branches he's talking about, right, is that when you're skeptical, you are basically being very careful not to make claims of existence or not existence, or non-existent, claiming existence or this cannot exist or something like that, right? Rather, you're staying behind the line where knowledge is possible, and then not going where knowledge is impossible. It's not. It's impossible to get to knowledge, which is not the saying that there isn't anything there, but you can't get knowledge of it, right? Now that entails a bit of description of what you mean by knowledge, and I would be willing to go into that, maybe not in this podcast, right? You can go listen through my presentation called Ideas, Metaphysics, Idealism Without Woo-Woo, right? A year or so back, you might get an idea of what I'm talking about. Now, what people want to go and say, they want to say either, I know what it is, or I know it isn't there, you could say, right? Where the good skeptic, in my opinion, would say, knowledge is impossible. I have to leave it alone. I have to reject, right? I could philosophize about it, but as long as I cannot get to any empirical access, I have to leave it alone, right? Now, it's the old question about the tree in the forest, and if it tips over, can you hear it fall, or does it exist, and all that, right? If you do not have access to it, you can neither claim existence or non-existence, right? What's the opposite of existence? I don't like the term non-existence. It sounds different than the opposite of existence. It's like saying when you close your eyes, the world doesn't exist. That doesn't function me, right? When you close your eyes, you have to say, I don't know if the world exists, right? While these other things, they're saying, the empiricists, as he's framing it, right? They say, yes, even when I close my eyes, the same world that I just experienced is there, right? The radical subjectivists say, when you close your eyes, there is no world. While the skeptic, in my opinion, would say, I don't know what is there, because I don't have experience. I don't have empirical data if I close my eyes, right? I might have a memory of it, but that is not the same as me having empirical access, right? So this reluctance to say, I don't know, I can't know, right? That's not what people like, because throughout, let's say, human history, right, there's a strong urge to be authoritative, right? And that possibly stems from being a parent. Parents will go around and say, well, I can't know that, and I don't know this, I don't know that, right? They can't lecture their children on what to do, right? Because the children say, well, you usually don't know anything, so how do you know how to raise me? Why should I go there, go this and do that, right? So they want to have this stick of, of certainty, so they can order around their children, basically, right? That's why human beings are very, very reluctant to be skeptics, right? They're very reluctant to say, I can't get to knowledge. I don't know. Knowledge is impossible, right? Even saying, I don't know, entails, as I've said before, that knowledge is impossible. Well, if you can't experience it empirically, well, then knowledge is impossible, right? It comes from the definition of empiricism. If you understand empiricism, and if you state the axiom correctly and then follow that axiom rather than violating, as it seems like Stefan Molyneux is doing, right?
That when you blink, the tree goes out of existence. When you turn around, things behind you go out of existence. Now, of course, this may seem nutty, and I understand.
It doesn't seem nutty, but it to me, it's equally nutty to say, I know that the world is still there even if I'm closed my eyes. I'm not saying it isn't there. Be careful not to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't know if it's there, right? That's why I have to turn around and open my eyes in order to check whether or not it's there, right? It's not that I looked once at the world when I was 17 and I haven't done it since, because then I knew what is there, right? It's both that you want to know it is there, you want to know what is there and where it is compared relatively to each other, right? You want to know if that saber-toothed tiger is still where it was when I looked at it last time, right? Or is it coming closer, right? That's why you want to open your eyes.
And that I think it's important not to just up and dismiss this kind of stuff, though. I think we do actually want to understand where it's coming from and why. Because one of the things that's really true about it...
Where it's coming from? What, all three of them?
Studying any kind of philosophy is... it's the what the hell stuff that goes on. Like, why would anyone believe this stuff? I've never gotten around to really deeply...
Oh, so he being Aristotelian, he means idealism and a radical, what was it, subjectivism? Is there the Berkeleyan idealism? I don't remember the academic term for this, right? But Berkeley, that said that you have to experience reality in order for that to be something something like what Molyneux frames it as here, right? So I guess he's going to criticize idealism and that Berkeleyan idealism and not Aristotelian empiricism, as he calls it, right? Because that's the right one. The other ones are just crazy, something like that, right?
Emotionally, maybe I should write a character about this in a novel, but I've never really gotten around to, I've never been able to deeply fathom this kind of perspective, and to some degree it's based on Descartes, the sort of brain in a tank being manipulated by an evil demon stuff. And this sort of radical subjectivism it's pretty wild. Now, of course, everybody has this thought, when you're a kid, does the light stay on when you close the fridge? And of course, I used to try and close the fridge to see if the light went off in the same way that I used to turn the light on and close my eyes in.
Why not be satisfied with, I can't know that, right? I can't know. As soon as I open the fridge, the light is not, if the light is on, it's not closed. And it's closed, I can't get to the light. Why not just accept that you can't get to it, right? Just accept it, man, right?
In my bedroom and see if I could see the room half in light and half in darkness. Just general experiments about these kinds of things that were fun, and I'm sure a lot of kids have done that kind of stuff. So you want to know, is the fridge light off when the fridge door is closed? And, you
Why
look,
do you
and
want
just
to know
before it
that?
closes off the...
Why would you want to know that? Because if the light is on the possible solution could be that if the light turns on when you open the door, the bulb works, right? So if the bulb works, it could be that there's light when you close the door, right? But you can't get to it, right? You can't get to it. So why would you want? I could understand that you want to know it, right? But then you would have to be satisfied with some secondary stuff, right? Place a sensor or something that is light sensitive in the fridge when it's closed, right? Isn't the experience of it, but it's a measurement of it, which is sort of a derivative of it, right? So that would be the alternative. But why do you want to know it? You can't know it, right? Then you have to sit in the fridge. It has to be so big that you can sit in the fridge. Then you could know it, I guess, right? I don't know. Yeah, I don't really care about this.
And you'll see the light go out, and then you'll find the latch. You'll push the latch. You're able to reproduce it, and then you have the answer, and then you move on to other things. So there is, I've always been empirically minded.
Empirically minded. Okay, so you want to work with your senses, right? Fine. I'm on board with that, right? Absolutely. Let's see if he sticks to it.
And I've had a great deal of difficulty understanding
Actually, I can do it already now, I think. Well, if he can't get to whether or not there's light, an experience of light inside his fridge when it's closed, then he'd have to say, I can't get to knowledge. Because that's what empiricism is. You need empirical data to claim knowledge if you're an empiricist, right? So he just has to say, I don't know. Because he can't know, right? Maybe he should say, I can't know. But maybe it's possible to know because it's possible to be inside the fridge. So I would say in this case, you would have to say, I don't know, right? Why wouldn't you be satisfied with that?
Idealist view, understanding the subjectivist view that reality exists only when you observe it, which means, of course, that it's not reality. It's even less stable than a dream. In a dream, you look at something and you look away.
Oh, no, don't go into dreams, man. Oh, stop it, man. Don't do that.
You look back and it's there. The dream itself, of course, only exists in your mind. It exists as a powerful and often instructive hallucination. So...
Okay, so he's referring to mind, right? It only exists within mind, more or less what he's saying, right? So if he agrees that those experiences of sound and taste and color and so on, they are also only in your mind, right? Then what is that outside world? How does he balance this? How does he picture this, right? If the senses, if the qualia is referring to the empirical is outside his mind, then they are outside before they come through his senses, right? How does he have access to that? Because then it's not empirical. So it has to come through his senses first and manifest as an experience inside his mind. And when it's in his mind, it's no longer outside his mind. Why can't he see this? Why is it so stupid that he can't see this? Right? The materialist fallacy is so grown into his thinking that he can't even see the forest for the trees, right?
Even in dreams, which is obviously manufactured, there's a kind of constancy and consistency to what you experience, as of course there is in objective reality. Now, if...
I don't exactly know what he means by constancy. If I have several, mathematical and scientific books and physics and chemistry and so on, microbiology. If I look up the word constancy, what would I find? Would I find constants like Avogadro's number or the light speed or something like that, right? A constant is not constancy, right? A constant is something that is relational. It's a fraction. When you take this and divide it by that, it's always this number, right? There is a direct proportion, direct or inverted proportionality between two kinds of aspects or measurements of reality, right? If you take the circumference of a circle and divide it by the diameter, you always get the same number, right? Is that constancy? Well, there are all sorts of different circles, right? There are all sorts of different diameters. But when you divide them, you get the same number. Is that the kind of constancy he's referring to, right? So it's it's just these big words that are slapped on, very sort of, I'm just, constancy.
You accept the idea that things don't exist when you don't look at them.
Well, that's also stupid, right? Because you can't say I would say maybe that it's even harder to say that something doesn't exist than it does exist, right? Because if you have experience and you experience cow, for instance, well, then you can say cow exists, right? But it's harder to say cow doesn't exist just because you're not experiencing it, right? Maybe you're just not experiencing cow. So, and that's what, religion takes advantage of. There's a God beyond the heavens, right? Okay, I can check it. So, how do I approach it? I better fall in line and do as they say, right?
And I can understand in the dream analogy or the dream version of things, really something doesn't exist when you're not looking at it because it's not even being projected on your sleeping mind as an illusion. But if you accept this, then the argument goes, well, how could there possibly be consistency in everything if it only exists when you look at it and it's, in a sense, a delusion? How can there be such consistency?
No, but I think there's the fallacious kind of reasoning, right? If I don't experience it, it doesn't exist. That is a claim that is... If you are using your senses in order to get to existence, and you do not experience, right? It's sort of a weird kind of empiricism, you could say. This subjective thing is referring to. If you're saying it doesn't exist when I'm not looking at it, that's because in order to claim that it doesn't exist, you would also need empiricism, right? You would also need the senses, right? So it screws with the idea what is entailed in the claim. So you can't say it doesn't exist because you do not have empiricism. So you can't claim anything, right? You can say, I don't know, right? That which you claim can be known, I am not knowing at the moment. So therefore, I can't say that it's not be known, right? If I'm not using my senses, I'm not using my senses where I could use my senses and access knowledge. So by removing my senses, I must also removing my access to knowledge, so I can't claim non-existence, right? Either. So I agree that it's bad philosophy. But his approach, which I believe would be, well, the world is still there even when I'm not looking. That is equally stupid. That is claiming knowledge when you don't have empiricism, right? Why is this so hard to understand, right? Is this, I need to be certain, right?
In the material.
Otherwise they will come and screw with my mind if I am not certain about, right? It's sort of half paranoid, right?
Real world, right? Your bedspread is the same color, the coffee is in the same place, objects have the same properties, temperature, the temperature at which water boils remains the same, and which water freezes.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. What kind of physics school have you gone to, man, right? Holy shit, man, you're ignorant. Water doesn't boil at the same temperature. It depends on the circumstances. If it's within an atmosphere, right, at 700 and whatever, millimeters of quicksilver, or 1 atmosphere or whatever, right, then it boils at what we call 100 degrees Celsius, right? And it freezes at 0. It's actually the scale of Celsius has been made from the boiling point and freezing point of water. But if you remove the atmosphere, suddenly the water boils at 25 degrees or something like that, right? You don't need that much energy in order to get it to boil, because there's no pressure to keep it in order to hold back its boiling point, so to say, right? He doesn't know what he's talking about, but it sounds like, oh yes, it's so constant, because I need it to be constant. Yes, nobody should screw with me in my mind and try to make me a subjectivist. My mommy was crazy, therefore I need to be certain.
He says, all throughout your life, how can there be such consistency? Now, of course, the answer is, well, things don't cease to exist when you're looking at them, but God looks at everything all the time, and that's why you get consistency. So it's a way of responding to the challenge.
So God arrives. Okay, so hey, I'm lumping God in here, right? Maybe I haven't listened carefully enough to this, right? But how the hell did sort of God all of a sudden arrive, right? It's sort of, I don't buy this shit, right? And he's become this half-ass God-loving thing in later years, right? What the hell is that about, right? I mean, the only explanation I've been able to come up with is, well, nobody's buying his shitty ethics, which is one big, vortex of sucking, right? And he has to rally Christians, these crazy people. He has to rally them into convincing them and other people that he's right because they would like it or something like that, right? So there are some people over there who likes my ethics, I think, and therefore I'm right.
Challenges of science, which was beginning to push back the explanation for material properties and actions, beginning to push God back from those things. And this really reached a culmination with Darwin in the 19th century, theory of evolution. It's a way of finding the need for God, which is a way of saying, well, we have to be moral. And if you understand that for most of human history...
We? Who are we? Who are those we, right? And have to? Who says? Do you say? Is it your decision? Is your master of everything and telling people, you have to do this, right? And what does it mean to be moral? right? Aren't you, violating, or at least very close to violating Hume's is-ought gap here without explaining how you do it, right? Or, jumping the is-ought gap without explaining, which is the Humean fallacy or whatever you want to call it, right? So it also, this kind of loose-ass philosophy where he's just throwing around words, right? And thinking he's doing good philosophy. Man, it sucks, right? Just be careful with it.
God is a vehicle for delivering morality. And
is he talking as if he means it, or he's talking as if he's representing what somebody else means? That's not really clear to me, right?
Absence of moral theories that could be established rationally and empirically.
Moral theories that can be established rationally. Would you explain, please? Right? Rationally. And what is rationally? He hasn't explained what that is, right? In this context here, we're dealing with metaphysics, apparently, right? So it would be nice if he would explain what rationality is. Because he talked about empiricism. That's not rationality. To the best of my understanding, why would that be use different words if they're the same? So they must be different. But he hasn't explained what rationality is, right? He actually hasn't explained clearly what he means by empiricism. But, I tried to do that right here, right? So it's like, it's the same situation as all the other times when he's trying to do that. He just fires the word cannon, right? And just fires words at you. All these fancy philosophical terms, right? And say, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys, these are wrong thinkers, these are right thinkers, they're crazy, these are right. It's sort of so simplistic, and in my opinion, it says a lot about his limitations as a philosopher and his lack of sensitivity in what it takes to be a good philosopher, in my opinion.
The no ought from an is that came post David Hume.
No, it came from Hume. Maybe that's what he means.
Finding a need for God, which I formerly looked at as, a need for a sky daddy and a community and so on. But it is the desperate need for the delivery mechanism for morality.
Okay. So he is implicitly saying he is more or less accepted, without stating it clearly, directly, that he has figured out that his own ethics sucks, right? He has been unable to convince people about his ethics and whatever moral principle that entails, right? He's basically saying, okay, I didn't find the Holy Grail of philosophy, a moral principle, right? I didn't find that. Now I have to rally God in order to come and save me, right? I have to rally the Christians to feel that I have some kind of moral power, right? If you can't have that moral authority, I gather that he basically feels that he has nothing left to do, right? If you can't go around moralizing, which is apparently the whole deal, he has written the book in order to be able to say, I can go around moralizing, telling people about you're right, you're wrong, you're right, you're wrong, because I wrote the book. Now, if he's come to the realization that his book sucks, right? What else can he do? Well, the only alternative is to go to the Bible and God and try to say, oh, I'm sorry, I said bad things about Christianity. I didn't mean it. I've grown up now. Yes, all you Christians, come over here. I'm going to talk about Jesus and all sorts of interesting Christian stuff, right? Come over here and be my little servants of my trying to mix the Bible with his secular ethics, right? What a freak show, man, right? It's something like this, right? It's something like this is going on, right? He's been losing his marbles for, 4 or 5 years or so. And I think it started for real, like around the time of Donald Trump, right? I think that what it might have spurred was, first of all, I don't think his family, his spouse, and his daughter understands UPB, and with good reason. They should reject it. It's stupid, right? And that he wasn't able to convince his daughter to become an anarchist, right? She has clearly stated in one of these videos he's done with his daughter, right, that she would like to go into politics. I mean, if that's not a failure of an anarchist daddy, right? So what did he do? He went into politics, right, in order to be an authority on politics, so daughter would love him, right? So he wouldn't create a chasm between him and his daughter by saying, no, I'm anarchist. Yeah, you might go into politics. I'm staying anarchist. And maybe that would create a schism or a chasm between him and the two of the women in the family, right? Then he would be maybe sidetracked and maybe be divorced in the end, right? He wouldn't want that because that's all he's got, right? So fuck his principles and fuck his, integrity. And then he starts to become politician and Christian and fuck everything, right? That's what I see.
God is the ought in the is, right? In God, the ought and the is are the same. And when you get rid of God, then you end up still serving something, obviously, right? If you're not serving God and you're not serving...
I'm not serving anything. So don't say you, right? Talk about yourself. You end up serving something. I don't, right? Don't use this you, right? Don't this sad, lame ass appeal to collective, right? Which you also should be a spokesperson against, right? You fucking hate collectivism, and now you're talking about you. Oh, you little peon, you little peasant out there, right?
Abstract morality, what are you serving? Well, you're serving pleasure. You're serving greed. You're serving...
Is that not a false dichotomy, right? If you don't do as God says, you are just being, pleasure-seeking, sex-hungry, whatever, Rolls-Royce buying stupid idiot, right?
Anger, you're serving...
That's a false dichotomy, right? One doesn't... The one is not exclusive to the other, or there's not just one category there, right?
In consumption, you're serving sex.
Sorry, that's not just two categories. That's what I meant.
So you're serving food. You're just serving the body, right? You either serve...
Oh, so that's what Christians love, right? They have monopoly on mind stuff, right? Mind of thinking and philosophy and all this spiritual shit, right? Whenever it comes to that, if you're not Christian, you are rejecting thinking, right? But that's what the alternative was, philosophy. Not being religious about it, not being mystic about it, right? And you're blurring the lines now between God and philosophy and everything, right? Because you're this kind of stupid sophist, right? It sucks, man, right? It's so... I fucking hate this kind of manipulation.
God, or you serve the body. And if you serve the body, then society collapses, right? If people simply serve their pleasures, their immediate physical pleasures, then society collapses. Because society is all of the standards that aren't base and instinctual. And that's what society is. That's how...
Society, what is that? You're an empiricist, okay? Mr. Empiricist. Mr. Aristotelian empiricist. How do you get to society, right? Are you not referring to knowledge now? Because that was the big deal with how to get to knowledge, right? Knowing about the tree that you didn't see and whatever, right? So, society. Okay, so if you need empiricism in order to have knowledge, and if you're referring to society, I would think that you mean some kind of knowledge, right? Otherwise, what are you doing? Are you screwing around with me or what? So if it's knowledge, it must have some kind of empirical data, right? That would be a sound, a taste, a color, and so on, right? Now, society, does it have a color? Does it have a sound? Does it have a taste? Does it have a feel? Does it have a smell? Does it have any of these? No. So society doesn't exist, right? Are you an empiricist, or are you just a crazy idiot, right? Who doesn't know what he's doing? I mean, which is it? Right? Don't you understand what you're doing when you're making the axiom of following empiricism, and then you're jumping into talking about all sorts of shit that isn't empirical, man? Right? Get a fucking grip, man.
There's a pride of lions, but they don't have a society, because they don't have any abstract mechanism by which to push back against.
How do you know what they have? Do you have access to other individual or other living entities' mind? No, you don't know what's going on there, right? You can't know it. So all these claims, I'm Mr. Philosophy. I can access other people's mind and tell you what is there, right? Without going into axioms. I don't need axioms, man. No. I'm just saying I know what's in that mind there, right?
Their base mammal desires. And by base, I don't mean bad or wrong. And of course, we have to embrace the animal side of us because it's...
Okay, would you mind, defining what you mean by bad or wrong? Would you mind? Please define wrong, right?
Really the seed of our intelligence, and it's what our intelligence evolved out of, and so you can't contradict it fundamentally. So base just means bottom of the brain, reptile, serotonin, endorphin pursuits, and so on, right? The pleasures. And because we have abstractions, our pleasures can very easily become addictive. Because we can make those pleasures.
But come on, man. Are we going into psychology, or, what are we doing here, right? Wouldn't you mind staying in philosophy, please, right? This is a philosophy show, right? It's called History of Philosophers, right? It's about, three kinds of metaphysics. And now you're going into sort of woo-woo kind of pocket philosophy, psychologizing about the people who have these kinds of thinkings or something like that. Well, we'll have to see in the next part, because I'm splitting this into, it's possibly going to be 4 or 5 parts. Let me warn you immediately, right? So let's see how it goes in the next part. I'm going to take a deep stab at this, right? Yeah, if you might wonder why I'm doing these kinds of, I'm jumping a lot on Stefan Molyneux and to some extent Bernardo Kastrup and his ilk, right? It's because these are the ones who are the most notable ones in the online sphere, you could say, right? And they're at the same time they're the most outspoken, but they're also some of the worst. I mean, Stefan Molyneux is on another planet when it comes to philosophy. He has no clue what he's doing, right? Bernardo Kastrup has some clue what he's doing, but he's taking some leaps that are completely unfounded, right? Which I just pointed out in my 7-part series, Deconstructing him and Rupert Spira, right? Within the last week or so, right? So, otherwise, see you in part 2. Please share, like, and subscribe, and consider donations and joining the board, links below. Otherwise, see you in the next one. Have a nice day.